Hello, and welcome to episode 25 of the NatalieinRenaissance podcast. Today, I want to talk about a phrase that has really resonated with me recently, and that is the phrase soft life. And I'm not sure if you've heard it before. I certainly had not prior to maybe a year and a half ago. And in looking up what soft life meant, it meant a commitment to self-love, self-care, self-compassion, self-worth, and prioritization of one's overall health and well-being. And I think that sounds like a lovely thing to aspire to, a soft life where you give, you receive, you're taking care of yourself, you know who you are, and you are living in a place, you're living in a community with people who also support that in you and you support that in other people. And as I was thinking about this idea of a soft life, it really means not being addicted to struggle or to the language of struggle. And I think that sometimes when we think of things happening too easily, it's almost as if they're not worth it in our eyes. For some reason, we really prioritize struggle and we really prioritize having negative experiences. And I think that if someone doesn't come up with a lot of negative experiences, it's almost as if that their experience isn't as valuable because they haven't struggled as much as someone else has. And it's just really interesting as I read about the idea of negative thought loops in the brain, of struggle, and how our body responds to all those things, stress and trauma, and all the negative things of the world. Like it's really not good for us. It's really not good for us to experience these things. We weren't meant to, but it's a whole nother thing to wear these things like a badge of honor and also to go after and chase after more of these kinds of experiences. And why am I talking about this idea of a soft life? Well, as a artist, as a creative, this idea of a soft life, just that idea is really important. I was reading a book recently called Wired to Create by Scott Kaufman, and over in the book, he's just kind of connecting the neurological pieces of psychology and of science and of the mind. And in the book, he talks a lot about play and creativity and exploration. And one of the things that he said was the things that we do, quote unquote, just for fun are actually crucial to our life happiness, resiliency, work performance, and creativity. And I was thinking about the pandemic, and I read a quote once where someone was saying that the artists and art is not really valued here in Western society as in other societies, but they made a point that it was the artists who saved a lot of people during the pandemic, right? We think about all the movies that came out on Netflix, all the books, all the new music. People were really hanging on to bits of art. And I was thinking about that and I was like, oh my goodness, I feel like that is really true, where I feel like a lot of the sensibilities of the very early days of founding the US has really played a big part in how our general society prioritizes things that are tangible, that are practical, above things that are idealistic. And this view of considering the arts like a luxury or like an extra non-necessity. And so I have been around people who they do see arts as not necessary and they do see them as frivolous, and they don't appreciate what the arts have. And these people, of course, were workaholics, and they would never allow themselves to rest or to take a day off. They were so driven by their performance and their work and by the numbers that actually their personal lives were very, very poorly well lived. And there was not really an investment in who they were as a person. And that was very evident in their relationships and also in just being around them. You could never relax and you could never just enjoy because they weren't allowing themselves to do that either. Because relaxing, because enjoying, because taking a moment to be creative or do something purely for fun, it was not something they would allow themselves to do. And so, in thinking about this idea of a soft life, I can't help but think of learning experiences where, of course, when you're learning something new, it's new. And we know that to learn something and to integrate it within your mind, within your body, we have to build these neural networks in our minds. And of course, they connect with other parts of the brain and the body. But really, the neural pathways of understanding have to come first. And when you encounter something new, of course, we've already talked about all the stress responses and all these things, but it's very uncomfortable. And so with my students, something that I have been saying to them is to help them and guide them in their language. And so whenever we encounter something new and they say, oh, this is really hard, we immediately stop and I say to them, I don't disagree with you, but I want to be careful in how we talk about experiences like this, how we talk about things, because often it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So what I would like for you to say is, let's say this is new to me. This is new to me, and the reason why I do that is because it is new, and that's one of the reasons why it's challenging or complicated, just because it's unfamiliar. But the more time we spend with it, the less new it becomes, and the more familiar we are with it, the more the neural pathways will be built, and then we can use them for fluency later. And so one of the things I've been just thinking about more recently is the language that we attribute to learning experiences. And I've talked about this on the podcast before, our thoughts that we have around various life experiences and how our language and how we interpret those things makes all the difference. And so I have been thinking a lot about how if people are determined that something is going to be a struggle, well, it is going to be a struggle. If people are determined that this experience is going to be one of their most magical experiences, then it is. And so when it comes to learning and life and living as a creative, idealizing a soft life, I think, is very important, and it's not something that I want to shy away from. I don't want to be addicted to struggle and to negative experiences. And in my previous learning at university for my two music performance degrees, I was very much the opposite, where I was very much a workaholic, very driven. And at that time, I think it was something that I took pride in. And this isn't to say that, effort isn't admirable or that being disciplined isn't an admirable thing to be, but it is not such a good thing when it comes at the expense of other things. And I think of so many people in the arts who they're not taking care of themselves because they're rushing to meet a deadline, they're not sleeping, they're not exercising, they're not taking time for their own little hobbies. All of these things come at a cost. They come at a cost of the creative soul. They come at the cost of the person, and between hormonal imbalance, adrenal fatigue, the ways that stress affect the body and the mind, I'm not sure if those things are worth it. And so there is definitely a price to pay for the struggle, and there's definitely a price to be paid for any one of these things. And so if we know that things in life are going to be new, if we know that some things in life are going to be challenging, why would we choose to be in survival mode all the time when we know that that is just in like an emergency situation, And so as a teacher, one thing that I am noticing is my students. And based on different family patterns and different family cultures, people are living at different paces. And I was even reading something that free time in general, especially free time for children, it's been declining since 1955. And the writer was saying that while this creates time for more activities, it can rob children of the enjoyment of pure fun, but also the opportunity for healthy development of skills necessary for creativity. And if we really trace back all of these things, music, drawing, painting, the arts in general, it's really not just about the skill set. These things go a lot deeper, and they go back to self-expression, to self-identity, and a lot of those things line up with this idea of the soft life, of taking care of yourself, of knowing your worth. And I think that the arts are just an expression of all of those things. And I'm not saying arts just express the good things. I think that people have a lot more to express, and so the arts give them that space to do so. But as a teacher, one of the things I want to make sure that I am doing for my students is allowing us to approach something that is complicated, something that could be tricky, in a soft life manner, in a place full of grace, in a place that honors space for development, space for growth, space for confusion. And in the book Wired to Create, Scott Kaufman says that we need a place for dreaming, we need a place for distraction, and we need a place for disintegration, because all of those things are essential parts of creating and constructing new things in the world and in ourselves. Recently this week, I was talking with someone about the history of the history of playing games, and it was so interesting that we were finding different sports and reading about the history and how some of them started thousands of years ago with just sticks or stones or pebbles. And it's so interesting how these things have lasted so long, and humans have always needed play. We have always needed games. We've always needed these little quote unquote distractions from life, these little areas to dream, to be distracted and to have fun. And it's so interesting that it's these things that bring people together, these things that one feels that you're really truly living. Blocking out a huge time chunk that you wouldn't normally do to just explore, or to just do nothing, or to do something crazy just because you can. I think those things are privileges and gifts. And so living the soft life, maybe it's about becoming more alive right where you are and honoring the human in you who doesn't produce all the time. It's honoring the soul who is at the bottom of all those artistic dreams and goals that you have, and the thing that started the whole process for you. I was telling someone that my whole journey into music was because I heard solo piano music when I was 5 years old, and I said, how can 10 fingers make those beautiful sounds when it sounds like 100 people are playing? And that was the question that kept me going, and it was my love for that discovery, for that building out of the skill set that brought me where I am today. That's the foundation. And whenever I find myself kind of getting out of alignment, I bring myself back to that little girl who fell in love with the piano, who loved using it as her playground to tell her stories to the world without using any words. And it's those things that really ground everything, my business practices, scheduling, everything. And so life can be as complicated and as complex as we want it to be. And I think that the more we use the language of struggle, the more we invite struggle into our lives. And I think that's an honest question that each of us, especially as teachers, artists, and business owners, we have to ask ourselves, are we addicted to struggle? Are we addicted to the badge of busyness, of high cortisol levels, of how many cups of coffee we've had to drink today? Or can we let go of all those things and really tap into, this is how my life feels for me. This is what it means to breathe a breath. This is what it means to draw on a piece of paper or to make a sound, and just go back to those basic elements of touch and sight and feel, and maybe occasionally taste. There is a really striking book that I'll mention that I read recently, and it's called Eros by William Westney. And he was talking about the deeper, more intuitive elements of being an artist or a musician, and sharing things where, of course, you have all the technical elements. Of course, you're going to be a knowledgeable performer and know the theory and the history and how it works. But actually making it happen is something that the book is all about. And it's about these deeper feelings that are communicated inside of the music. Not only just being a thinking musician, but also a feeling musician, and integrating them both together and balancing them together is really his argument in the whole book. And so one of the things that he says throughout the book is an artist needs to recover their senses. Recover their senses of what it's like to be a human alive in this big and beautiful world. And I couldn't agree more. I really could not agree more. And so I'd like for you to join me in exploring more of the soft life as a teacher, as a musician, as a business owner, and to be in a state of receiving, of experiencing, of being aligned, of being embodied, and really being present in these moments, which are all gifts. I think all of these little things that we have between our intellect and our intuition and our imagination, those gifts are so big. They're so big, they're so valuable. So I think that we should use all of them. And we should also be cognizant of rest and space, because those are just as beautiful as the sounds that we make. It's the space, the rest in between them that give them their meaning. And I think so it is with life. Of course, we have these mountaintop moments. We have these challenges that at times we like to go after, but is our normal baseline of life, is that supportive of us? Is it nurturing us? Is it enhancing us? Is it keeping us healthy? Is it keeping us happy? I think those are the questions that we need to be asking ourselves, and it's something I'm going to be thinking about for a while. Thank you for listening to this episode today. Please like and leave a review. It would be so appreciated. I love hearing from my listeners in what resonated with them, and sometimes it gives me ideas for something else that I can talk about. Like and follow on Instagram if you're not already at NatalieinRenaissance. We'll see you in the next episode.